Good afternoon, adventurers. Welcome to the channel. Welcome back, if you aren't new to this channel where we talk about D&D stuff, specifically D&D with the 2024 rules, at least the last while. That's what I've been doing. Today I want to talk about a character build that is the culmination of a few tips and tricks that I've been dropping here and there, and some that I haven't mentioned yet on the channel, I don't think, but we'll get to those. Often when I'm building a new character and envisioning who they are as a person, I like to ask myself and imagine what they do between adventures, in the days and weeks when they're not traveling around with a party, slaying evil and saving the day. Sometimes my characters spend their time at the tavern buying rounds of drinks for people with their hard-earned adventuring money. Sometimes they have day jobs. They're farmers and shopkeepers, entertainers of one sort or another. And today I'm envisioning a bounty hunter, someone who, similar to the adventuring business, tracks down and either kills or brings in alive someone who has earned a bounty. Criminals, mostly. Bandits, raiders, that kind of villainy. And there are plenty of archetypal bounty hunter characters that we can draw inspiration from. Jango and Boba Fett. Actually, a bunch of Mandalorians. Samus Aran, Spike Spiegel, Arthur Morgan, Deadpool, Agent 47, Combustion Man. It's an expansive list. Not all of them work alone, at least not all of the time, but they don't shy away from the idea either. I've been talking on some rogue-based tricks in the game's rules lately, both on the channel and in my free time. And what better way to splice them together than by making our own bounty hunter character, someone who isn't afraid to mix it up by themselves when needed, either sneaking ahead of the party to maintain stealth, or just working on their own, either in a solo campaign or imagined between sessions. Someone who can hold their own long enough to complete an objective and get back to the party, or go in solo and accomplish some task and then get back to the safety of a town or wherever. Someone who can tie down an important enemy or two with ropes, chains, manacles, and use gadgets to aid in their mission. Let's not beat around the bush, this is a Thief Rogue build, y'all probably saw that coming. And I've been wrestling what to do with the multiclass aspect of the build, because I can't resist multiclassing, for a while now. And really, to bury the lead a little bit, anything with extra attack would do just fine, but I think of the Artificer when I think about someone using gadgets and gizmos to aid in their fighting. And when I think of characters like Batman, who kind of do their own thing with technology at their side. So let's get right into it with a level of Rogue. We could start Artificer if we want Constitution saving throw proficiency instead of Dexterity, as both classes get intelligence saves regardless. Concentration spells aren't really going to be our bread and butter with this build though, so Constitution saving throws are a little less valuable than they might be for another character. Doesn't mean they're bad to have on hand by any means, but dexterity saves will probably save us from a bit more damage in the long run than Constitution saving throws will. They're just that much more common. Starting Rogue also gets us one more skill proficiency than if we started Artificer and multiclass Rogue. When you take Rogue as a secondary class, you do get one of their skill proficiencies off of their list, but when you start as a Rogue, you get 4 skills, and most other classes only get 2, so we still come out ahead one by starting Rogue. As for our character's background, if you've seen any of my build videos before, you already know I am a huge proponent of customizing backgrounds. I don't feel a need to limit characters to what the existing backgrounds give, especially after Tasha's Cauldron of Everything cracked that system wide open and just said, pick whatever ability scores and pick whichever tool proficiencies and languages, skill proficiencies, and starting gear you want. It was a better way, I think, and I maintain that even still. The point is, we want +2 to strength, which is weird for a rogue and for an artificer, I know, bear with me. And we want +1 to either dexterity or intelligence, as we need both of those for multiclassing and just because they're generally good to have. So we want that 17 in strength to start, as it is our primary ability score for this kind of odd build. And we want 14 in dexterity for armor class with medium armor that we will have very shortly from the Artificer dip, and for skills that use it like sleight of hand and stealth. And we want intelligence to be at 14 because we need that for Artificer. That'll make our Artificer DC and attack bonus not great, but not trash either if we want to toss out a Thunder Wave or something to get enemies away from us. The chance will be at least there. That leaves us with only 12 for Constitution, which is a little unfortunate, but we will have some ways to mitigate damage and heal ourselves. We'll get there. It should be fine. That's kind of the price of multiclassing with classes that use different ability scores. Constitution tends to be the one that suffers, especially when you're me and you throw in an extra ability score like Strength that you wouldn't need otherwise. And we also can put a 10 in either Wisdom or Charisma. I recommend Wisdom generally, as we aren't really aiming to be the party face, though it would behoove a bounty hunter character to be able to negotiate for themselves effectively, communicate efficiently with their patrons, and potentially intimidate people into coming along willingly, but sadly, we just don't have the stats. There is certainly a different flavor of bounty hunter that we could go for that has charisma, but it's not what we're doing today. We have plenty of good options for our origin feat, as per usual, but today I'm going with healer. That's most of what I meant when I said we have ways to heal ourselves and protect ourselves from damage, and so Constitution can be a little lower than we might want it, because we can use those utilize actions with a healer's kit to spend a hit die, add our proficiency bonus, and regain that much HP. We can also use that on our allies to heal them as well. Everyone loves a healer. If you're not inclined to go for healer in your own versions of this build, go ahead and take any of the other great origin feats like Lucky. I always recommend that for rogues, as it can give us sneak attack at will. Tough, alert, skilled, even Magic Initiate can be really good. Plenty of incredible options. Like I mentioned before, we do get 4 skill proficiencies from being a rogue and 2 more from our background. Most of these, you're going to be able to choose whichever ones suit your version of the character best, but we do need a few specifically. We want stealth, we want sleight of hand, obvious choices for a rogue, we want arcana, that's going to come into play mostly much later. Aside from that, we want athletics and acrobatics if we plan to use grappling hooks, especially, as those use an acrobatics roll, DC 13, in order to throw them and hook them onto something. So we do kind of need that proficiency if we want to use those reliably. If you're not worried about grappling hooks, then by all means we can ignore acrobatics if we want. It is up to you. And at level 1, we of course get Thieves' Cant and one other language of our choice, which can be one of the rare languages. It doesn't have to be only the simple ones that all characters have access to, which is nice. We can get whatever you think is best. We also get proficiency with Thieves' Tools, which means that when we're making a sleight of hand check to pick a lock, we have advantage, because we have proficiency in both sleight of hand and lockpicking tools, or Thieves' Tools. Before I get too distracted, we also get expertise into skills. Those should probably be stealth and sleight of hand, the standard rogue pair. There's a reason they're the popular choice. We also get sneak attack, finally, at only 1d6, but 1d6 is a pretty nice chunk at low levels anyway. As for level 2, I was tempted to multiclass immediately into Artificer, but Cunning Action is super good. It's so nice being able to disengage out of danger with a bonus action, dash if we need to cover more ground, or even hide to keep ourselves safe, and get advantage on our next attack, assuming we're successful at the DC 15 roll, and we exceed the passive perception of the enemies we're trying to hide from, which you might be surprised how few of those enemies actually have more than 15 passive perception, especially at low levels, so as long as we clear that baseline DC 15, we're usually rock solid. And as long as we're taking that level in Rogue, we might as well take just one more level in Rogue, getting one of our build's core features. The Thief subclass gives us Fast Hands, which allows us to make the Utilize action as a bonus action, meaning that we can do those things like using the healer feat and slapping manacles on somebody or wrapping them up in a rope or chain. Those all use the utilize action, much like a bunch of other items in the adventuring gear section. I made a whole video on that up there. If you would like more details, go check that one out. So with fast hands, we can use those things as a bonus action before or after attacking to deal damage, grappling a creature. That's one of the conditions that we need to impose on an enemy in order to put manacles or a chain or rope on them anyway. We can now grab someone and then restrain them with one of those items in the same turn. And that is super cool and super nice for adding control effects that help our party beat the ever-loving crap out of our enemies. We're not the only ones who can deal damage after all. And for all my talk of being a solo agent, that's between adventures. We do want to build for being in a party as well. Fast Hands also lets us pick a lock or pick a pocket as a bonus action now by making a sleight of hand check. Another reason to have expertise in those. If someone puts a key in their pocket or something and we're in a fight with them, we can just take that out of their pocket with a bonus action and still, stab them in the chest or whatever. Now, importantly, I do want to note, I haven't mentioned nets much in this video so far, but we can sacrifice one of the attacks from our attack action to throw a net onto an enemy instead. That doesn't use an attack roll anymore, that's a saving throw. But the important note is that that doesn't use the utilize action, so we can't do it as a bonus action. We can throw a net on someone and then, if that succeeds, wrap them in a chain to restrain them further, and now they have to take 2 actions to get free, or break the rope somehow and use an action to get out the chain, or I guess break both, you know what I mean. The Thief subclass also gives us a climb speed, which doesn't come up all of the time, but is quite nice when it does. There's usually terrain we can scramble around on, and being able to climb around on stuff without being slowed down is very nice for getting into position to do the things we want to do. Besides, that means we can do things like climb up an archer tower, tie up the archer in a rope, and throw them off the thing. For posterity, I'll mention the Thief subclass also lets us calculate our jump distance using dexterity rather than strength, but our particular strength is higher than dexterity, so that doesn't matter for us. It is usually a good feature for thieves to have, though. And our sneak attack now becomes 2d6, which is just nice. Tempted as I am to multiclass now, and while I don't usually mind very much if my ability score increases and feats get put off to a later level, I know a lot of people probably don't like that, so let's go ahead and grab a 4th rogue level now and get the grappler feat. You may have noticed I've been mentioning grappling quite a bit. This will allow us to move around more quickly when we have a creature grappled. That'll allow us to move them closer to our melee allies for the beating that they're going to deliver, all without impeding our bonus actions. We can also use a bonus action to slap manacles or rope or chain. I keep saying that, but it keeps being true. Or we can even use a bonus action to dash if we need a bit of extra distance. Running up to an enemy, grappling them, and then moving back could be quite a bit of ground to cover. The feat also lets us make an unarmed strike, and when we hit with the damage version of an unarmed strike, also try to grapple somebody, so we can add about 5 damage, as our unarmed strikes don't have a die attached to them. We could have gone with the Tavern Brawler origin feat, and there was a version of this build where I had fighter levels instead of Artificer, and I had the unarmed fighting style, but I kind of wanted blind fighting instead. All that's irrelevant because we're going with Artificer. Unarmed strikes don't do a ton of damage, but if we want, we can tack on an extra 5. That does mean if we go for the attack roll and miss, we don't get to grapple the target. We don't even get a chance. So, trade-offs, maybe not the best move against enemies with high AC, and it's always going to be a risk no matter what, because there's always a chance we'll miss. The feat also rounds our strength out in a nice even 18. Now we can go ahead and start grabbing those Artificer levels. Here we get proficiency with medium armor and shields, which is a huge boost to our AC, which has been, frankly, lacking a little bit with only 14 dexterity. Now we can pick up, if we can afford it, a breastplate and shield, although we kind of want our hands free for throwing things and grappling enemies, so we might not use a shield all the time, but it's nice to have the option. especially if we're fighting creatures that can't be grabbed like ghosts or oozes. We also get proficiency with Tinker's Tools, we get 2 cantrips, we get 2 first level spells. Artificers prepare spells the old-fashioned way based on Artificer level and intelligence modifier. I'm actually a little happy that method of preparing spells went away in the new player's handbook, but since Artificer wasn't reprinted since Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, it still uses the old version. We also get the magical tinkering feature, which is largely going to have roleplay value more than anything mechanical, but can be nice for some utility, being that we can use it to put a picture of something on a surface and carry it around, kind of like a photograph, or make our chain glow with 5 feet of dim light and 5 more feet of bright light, meaning that the character it's wrapped around is easily visible, especially in the dark. That could be nice if they're trying to get away from us. All we need for that is a little creativity. As for cantrips, Sneak Attack is usually going to deliver more damage, so we can focus more on utility, stuff like Mending and Message. Mage Hand is also a good one, although Artificers can get Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade, which we can stack Sneak Attack on top of. However, we are going to be getting extra attack at some point, and the Blade cantrips don't play nice with that. So we can safely just not worry about them and take utility cantrips. Artificers also have access to the excellent Guidance cantrip, which means our ability checks are even going to be that much better as long as we have an action to cast it first. And we could, at our option, take something like Acid Splash and or Sword Burst to get a little bit of area of effect damage, although frankly not that much. But moving on from that, Artificer 2 gets us our infusions. These are our gadgets, our tools of the trade. These are going to largely be up to you. The simplest answer is to grab a +1 weapon, or radiant weapon actually, and a +1 armor. Having a +1 breastplate would give us 17 AC with our 14 dexterity, and having a +1 weapon just means we hit more and deal a little more damage. But we could also do something a little less boring, like take a bag of holding, especially if the party doesn't have one already. We gotta put all our manacles, ropes, chains, and nets someplace, after all. And it's useful for holding other gear, like a block and tackle for lifting heavy objects, or a battering ram for battering down doors. Artificer 3 comes with our second subclass, for which we are taking the Armorer. Rural Juror. I already made that reference in a video recently. In any case, we get to treat our armor, whatever type of armor we're wearing, as a magical thing that can don or doff on and off of us as an action. Does not have a strength requirement, although again, for our specific character, that doesn't actually matter, because we have plenty of strength. We can also use the armor as our spellcasting focus, which is very nice, considering we'll need our hands for lots of various activities throughout our fights. We also get to choose one of 2 variants for our magic armor, the Defender armor or the Infiltrator armor. As a rogue, I bet you can guess, as a rogue mix, I bet you can guess which one we're taking. That allows us to have advantage all the time on stealth checks. We could move up to heavy armor here, negating that advantage but sticking at a normal 1d20 roll. And in fact, we couldn't have advantage or disadvantage at any point because we already have both canceling each other out. We have expertise in stealth, so we're gonna be rolling pretty well in general, and it'll get even better in the future, but we'll get to that. Or we can stick to our breastplate a little longer, that's totally fine too. The Infiltrator armor also gets a cool lightning blaster, either mounted on the back of one of our gauntlets or on our chest. It's a little unclear to me if the chest one requires a hand at all to use. That would make it the only weapon in the game that doesn't require a hand, which is cool as hell, but worth asking your DM about first, as is usually the case. And the Lightning Blaster counts as a simple ranged weapon, meaning we can use Sneak Attack with it, and the Sneak Attack dice will deal lightning as well. Super cool, and while I haven't made that character before, I actually know people in real life that have played that very character. I've sat with them at the table. It is just as cool and fun as it sounds. Perhaps I'll build more strongly into that another day with things like the archery fighting style and sharpshooter, but that's not what we're doing today. It is very nice to have a ranged weapon on hand, though. Get it? With the option to use it at will if we can't get to creatures or if we just want to keep our distance for any number of reasons. And since it's mounted on one of the gauntlets or on our chest, we can use our hands for everything we normally need to use them for. We can even hold a weapon in the hand that the gem thing is mounted on. How cool is that? We also get Magic Missile and Thunder Wave, always prepared to wonderful first level spells. Magic Missile doesn't even use our intelligence modifier because it doesn't have attack rolls or a save DC, so that's an excellent ranged at-will damage option that is guaranteed damage as long as the enemy doesn't cast shield. Not that many enemies can even cast shield in the first place, so it's practically guaranteed damage a lot of the time. As for Thunder Wave, that does have a saving throw attached, and our intelligence isn't as high as it could be if we were, say, a full Artificer, but at least we have the option to deal damage to multiple creatures and potentially knock them away from us if we find ourselves getting surrounded or getting outnumbered. And at this level, we also get an ability that lets us spawn in a set of Artificer's tools, Artisan's tools, not Artificer's tools, of our choice after an hour of work. We usually are going to have the tools that we're proficient in around anyway, I would imagine, especially if we have an extra dimensional storage space like a bag of holding or a portable hole. So this may be more or less useful, but I suppose in the moment it could end up being helpful. Who's to say? Artificer 4 gives us nothing besides another feat, and we have a neat subversion to the stealth archetype here. Remember last level when I said we could move up to heavy armor if we want, taking that straight roll on stealth instead of disadvantage because of the infiltrator armor? We're gonna want to do that because guess what? Our weird rogue artificer build is taking the heavy armor master feat. Now, since our character level is 8, our proficiency bonus is +3, we take 3 less damage whenever we take bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage from an attack. That doesn't work on spells like Erupting Earth that deal bludgeoning damage, it's specifically things with an attack roll. But that's still going to be the majority of enemies, and that's still pretty good since it applies to every single attack all the time as long as we're wearing heavy armor. Doesn't require a reaction or anything from us. The damage reduction will also go up when our proficiency bonus increases, which will be next level to +4, right? And then levels 13 and 17 as well for a maximum of 6 damage reduction. If we're level 17 and we're fighting a Merilith, say, that makes 7 attacks for like 13 damage each time, if we're taking away almost half that damage, that is huge. Of course, if we're fighting something that does like one big attack of 30 damage, it's a little less useful, but any HP we can save ourselves is HP we don't have to worry about healing later. It takes pressure off of our healer feat, it takes pressure off of our party cleric or whoever. It's just good. And this feat is so much better than it was in the 2014 version, because one, it doesn't require the attacks to be made with a non-magical weapon. That was always kind of a stupid qualifier, but especially now because the damage reduction increases with proficiency bonus. It used to be a flat 3, now it goes way higher than that. It's literally double at high levels. That also means we can move up from our breastplate +1 with our infusion, right, to plate armor +1, assuming we can afford it. Hopefully we have 1500 gold by level 8, but even if not, we can make it if we have some downtime and 750 gold, which is much easier to swing money-wise. And we are proficient with smith's tools as a result of being an armor artificer. I didn't mention that last level, but it is true. Which means our AC is now sitting pretty at 19, and 21 if we throw that shield on. Not bad for a rogue. As we level up in Artificer one more time to level 5, our character level goes up to 9, proficiency bonus increases to +4, which means that damage reduction goes up, all our skills go up, our expertises go up by 2, and we get 2nd level Artificer spells. There are certainly some good ones, and we even get Mirror Image and Shatter, 2 great spells, always prepared from our subclass. I haven't talked much about spell selection yet beyond cantrips and the subclass ones that we always have, but there are plenty of really good utility and support options, things like Featherfall, Enhanceability, Jump, Invisibility, and none of those require us to have a very good intelligence score either. Perhaps more importantly though, at this level we get extra attack. Now we can attack twice instead of once when we take the attack action. That means we can do things like grapple a creature and stab them. And since we have the grappler feat, we have advantage on attacks against creatures we are grappling, giving us sneak attack. Our sneak attack is falling behind a little bit at this point, but don't worry, we're going to take more rogue levels next. It also means we could throw a net over somebody to restrain them and then stab them. It means we could grapple someone, throw a net on them, and put manacles on them if we wanted to really triple down on the control effects. We could throw nets on 2 creatures. We can grapple 2 creatures because we have 2 hands. The options expand so much when we have extra attack. Now we can do things like run up to an enemy, grapple them, put a chain around their legs so that they're restrained, drag them over to our melee allies for a royally huge beatdown, and also stab them once ourselves. How incredibly cool is that list of things I just said? For the record, we could have been doing this stuff earlier with extra attack, but I figured cunning action and the thief stuff would be good to get early too. If you're doing this build in your own game and you want to front load the Artificer levels earlier, by all means go for it. I think it'll be great fun to be doing this stuff at level like 6, or even 5 if you want to start Artificer and take the Constitution saves instead of Dex. Oh, and I should clarify before we move on, the ability score increase from the feat last level, I almost forgot to mention, we're going to take Constitution +1. That won't really do much right now, but we'll get more health later. Now, believe it or not, we are actually done with Artificer, so back into Rogue we go. Level 5 gets us another die of Sneak Attack, and Cunning Strikes, which lets us sacrifice some of the damage from Sneak Attack to instead apply even more control effects, assuming the target fails a saving throw of some kind. Piling that on top of our Grapple Stab Handcuff combo is just going to render enemies completely inert, pretty much. It's honestly kind of unnecessary, but it also gives us the option to, for example, throw a net on one creature and sneak attacking a different one for the poisoned condition, giving them disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks. Things like that. At this level, we also get Uncanny Dodge, which allows us to have the damage of an incoming attack as a reaction. That stacks on Heavy Armor Master. It's a little unclear to me whether the halving comes in before the numeric decrease. That's going to be up to you and your DM and your party to figure out, as the rules are pretty quiet on it. There is a rule for resistance, that resistance and vulnerability apply after other modifiers, but Uncanny Dodge doesn't give us resistance, it just halves the damage coming in, so it's gonna be up to interpretation at your table whether that applies with the full reduction from Heavy Armor Master, or whether it reduces the damage and then halves the smaller amount. It's only a point or two different anyway. It's not a huge deal, but I'm just pointing out so you're aware that the rules are pretty quiet about it. Rogue 6 gives us 2 more expertise, and we will put those in Arcana for later. Again, it's going to be a bit of a wait, but it'll be worth it when we get there. And one other skill of our choice. We can really pick whatever. Rogue 7 drops 2 unbelievably strong buffs on our character. 2 great features: Evasion, which gets us half damage or no damage on our dexterity saving throws, most of them. Technically that doesn't apply to things like Disintegrate that don't allow for half damage on a successful save. That one's still going to be all or nothing, but most things allow half damage on a save, and those are now half damage on a fail and no damage on a success. Incredible. The other is Reliable Talent, allowing us to treat any roll of less than 10 on the die or an ability check with a skill that we're proficient in to count as a 10 on the die, which we then add our modifiers to. That means that our stealth rolls, which have sort of disadvantage, they have that forced straight roll, right? Now have a minimum of, at this level, 20. Now it might sound like that number should be a little higher for a rogue, and most rogues would have more dexterity, but in the monster manual that came out in February, the 2024-2025 monster manual, there are 503 stat blocks, and 41 of them have enough passive perception to detect us if we have 20 on our stealth roll. That's only about 8% to begin with, and I also want to point out 22 of those are dragons. adult and ancient dragons, as well as the Draco Lich, which is technically an undead creature, but like it's a dragon. So as long as we know we're not in a dragon lair, we're still going to be able to hide from most of the stuff in the game. And as we get more in our proficiency bonus, and our dex will go up a little bit later, we're going to be able to hide from more and more stuff. It won't be a problem almost all the time. We also can no longer fail the DC 13 check to slap manacles, a rope, or a chain on somebody. I know I keep harping on those 3 items, but it's true. Now we can use that bonus action without fail and restrain a creature every time, or put manacles on them and give them disadvantage on attack rolls every time. I would have liked to get this benefit earlier, as it really backs up the flavor that we're going for and the mechanical benefits that we're going for of those bonus actions, but I also wanted extra attack, so, you know, multiclassing has its trade-offs. Rogue 8 brings another feat. I was originally planning to take Heavy Armor Master at this level, now that we have Reliable Talent to cover that stealth disadvantage, but once I remembered that the Artificer gets to nullify that by having advantage anyway, Reliable Talent got a bit less important for that, so I took it earlier in the build. Now we can kind of pick from a few, and the Rogue gets an extra feat at level 10, so we have 3 coming up real fast here. So let's just go over all 3 of them at once. I will also say these 3 are less important to the build than the first 2, so if you want to swap them out for other ones that you like better or you think fit your character better, by all means do that. For me, I'm going with Defensive Duelist as a big boost to AC, now that our proficiency bonus is like pretty good. Adding that bonus to armor class against melee attacks until the start of our next turn as a reaction may prevent even more damage than Uncanny Dodge. In fact, is quite likely to. Preventing an attack outright is going to do more for us than having its damage, and potentially negating multiple attacks is even better. Aside from that, I'm planning to take Mage Slayer for some enhanced offensive capability against mages, making them drop concentration a little bit more effectively, and also so that I can succeed on a saving throw that I would have failed with Intelligence, Charisma, or Wisdom once per short rest. We all know by this point, I'm sure, how great a feat that is. It's in the plans, especially since our mental stats on this character are a little lackluster. And the last is Resilient Constitution, so that we can get proficiency in Constitution saving throws. Obviously, if you took the Artificer first version of the build, go for Dexterity instead, and adjust ability score increases from your various feats accordingly. You might be wondering why we want that saving throw proficiency. We're going to get to that in a little bit. Those feats will also raise our Dexterity by 1 with Defensive Duelist, Dexterity again with Mage Slayer, now that's a 16, and Constitution, of course, making that a 14, leaving us with some nice even numbers and some very nice defensive abilities. In the meantime, the levels between, we get a few more sneak attack dice for a total of 7d6 by the time we get to level 13. The stealth attack cunning strike option from Thief level 9, allowing us to stay hidden after an attack for a little bit less damage, with a couple other qualifiers, and improved cunning strike, allowing us to use 2 cunning strike options on 1 sneak attack. At level 13, though, we get an excellent Thief feature called Use Magic Device, a reference to the oldest versions of the game, which does a few things for us. We get to attune a 4th magic item. That's huge by itself. We can use a magic item that normally spends charges and have a 1 in 6 chance to not spend charges on that effect, meaning we can cast more spells and do more cool stuff before having to wait and recharge them. And we can cast any spell from a scroll, regardless what class lists that spell is on and what level it is. If it's above 1st level, we do have to make an Arcana check. That's why we've been investing in those. The DC for which is 10 plus the spell's level, so maximum 19 with a 9th level spell. With expertise and reliable talent, we can't roll lower than a 22 here, so we're actually golden. We can cast any spell from a scroll, no matter what. Depending what spell scrolls we have access to, that could make us a viable second party healer, AoE damager, control magic. The potential for this feature is limited only by what scrolls we find or can buy or our party members can make, depending what's allowed in the campaign and how much downtime we have to do it. Now, before we continue to level 14, I do want to address some things, some discussion that I've seen online, just to put the nail in the coffin for this. I have seen people talking about using spell scrolls as a bonus action because they are magic items, and thieves can use magic items as a bonus action, right? Kind of. Thief rogues can use the magic action to activate a magic item that requires that action. Spell scrolls do not use the magic action. They use the same casting time as the spell normally does. Period. The description for spell scrolls, in fact, I'll put it on screen somewhere, doesn't say the words magic action anywhere in the description for the item. So, unfortunately, we do have to spend actions on spells that normally cost an action. It's just how it is. It's still a really good feature. Holy crap, is it a good feature. Moving on, level 14 gives another few cunning strike options, including the knockout option, which, well, maybe not the best in a conventional fight, as some enemies are pretty good at Constitution saving throws. If it lands, it can just take someone out of a fight, essentially. And it does fit that bounty hunter theme really nicely, to be able to, say, break into a castle window, knock out the person whose bedroom you just entered, and drag them out into the night, to be turned in for a bounty somewhere else. Or whatever the case may be, but it fits my mental image of this character really, really well. What's important here is that it adds even more control effects to our repertoire, and having options is always nice. And our final level, unfortunately it's the final level, Rogue 15 gives us proficiency in both wisdom and charisma saving throws with the slippery mind feature. Now it makes a little more sense why we took resilient constitution, as we now have proficiency in all saving throws except strength and death saving throws, but those are really hard to get proficiency in. You pretty much have to be a monk. We even have evasion to soup up our dexterity saving throws, and mage slayer to cover our backs if we do fail those intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saves. We reduce bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage by 6 at this level, and can use uncanny dodge to reduce one strong attack's damage even further, or defensive duelist to not get hit at all and raise our armor class by 6 until the start of our next turn. We may not have a ton of HP with 14 constitution and no tough feat, but we can heal ourselves with the healer feat, and also we have a few spell slots that we can spend on things like cure wounds if we need to as well. We can also use defense buffs like mirror image to help us not take damage in the first place also. We're defensively a powerhouse, especially considering our armor is at least +1 plate armor, assuming we haven't found any real armor in the wild that benefits us more. Offense, though, is trickier. We can grapple enemies, move them around well, tie them up in ropes and chains, slap cuffs on them, manacles, that is, of course. Use any number of those things to gain advantage for sneak attack, which we can also trade dice from to apply even more control effects and conditions. Sneak attack deals 8d6 damage at this point, which isn't a bad thing, and we do get more because of extra attack when we're not using it for a net or grapple attempt. But at the end of the day, we're really more of a control unit than a damage dealer. On the other hand, if we grapple and chain down creatures every round, the whole fight is going to snowball in our party's favor as the enemies find themselves unable to effectively do much of anything, especially since we can also sneak attack them in the process. We could also chain down one enemy and potentially poison, daze, blind, or otherwise control another one, as long as we can still sneak attack it. Or 2 of those things with improved cunning strike. And we can do these things all day. They don't cost us anything except for a little bit of damage and possibly some gold on destroyed nets and such. Until we run out of nets and chains and ropes, we can keep going. I'm a fan of the grapple shank combo, and admittedly the damage doesn't keep up well into the high levels. That's always kind of a rogue issue. It's helped a bit by the right magic items, especially given the whole bonus action thing. If we get a cool wand, one that we can use to cast like Fireball or even just Magic Missile or Lightning Bolt, something like that, or a staff that does those things. Just watch the attunement requirements. We can up our damage a whole lot when we want to, and even using scrolls to cast things instead of the usual grapple stab can also up our damage quite a bit as well. Heck, even if we can get something like a bracer of flying daggers from Waterdeep Dragon Heist, an item like that can also be used to great effect by a thief rogue. There are plenty of options available to us. Well, they may be available to us depending on the DM and the campaign. DMs, give your thief rogues cool items. Astute viewers may have noticed that we didn't get an epic boon feat this time. The only way we could have worked that in would have been to wait on the 4th and 5th Artificer levels until the very end, levels 19 and 20. And at that point, why even kind of bother getting the extra attack? We could just go full Thief Rogue, honestly, and call it a day. I would have liked to get extra attack even earlier anyway, as I mentioned earlier, but went with this for the build instead. And while epic boons are strong feats, having 5 normal ones is fine too. I also didn't specify a species for the build, again, because there are plenty of good options, and I like it to leave things open to you guys to make your own versions of the character, make the stories that you want to tell, not just what I might think is mechanically best. If you'd like some recommendations, though, Goliaths are always great as grapplers because they can turn to a large size, which other races can't do unless they're a Rune Knight fighter or a Path of Giants barbarian, or have a Potion of Growth or the Enlarged Reduce spell. There are options, but Goliaths can do so with a species feature. And remember, ropes and chains only have to tie around a creature's legs in order to restrain them, so if there's any question on whether we can do those things to a huge creature, think Luke and the Rebels tying up the AT-ATs at the start of Empire Strikes Back. I didn't really intend for this build to be like a full-on grappler build, though. That's for another time. A flying species like fairies or Aarakocra could be really cool with the grappling we are doing, though, especially if you can wrap someone in a chain and then lift them up in the ground and drop them on the ground for fall damage and the prone condition with no saving throw. That's another nice layer to that little sandwich. And gnomes get advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws across the board. That's a crazy powerful feature. That also goes a long way to helping, especially in the early game before we get Mage Slayer, with those lower scores. And there's nothing saying a small creature, like a fairy or gnome, can't carry around a bunch of chains and whips, as long as you've got the strength for it, which our character definitely does. And speaking of strength, you may have also noticed ours ended up at 18 rather than 20. That's something that I think a lot of people on online forums and in the optimizer space usually try to avoid because bigger number better, but realistically, it's only 1 less on our strength checks and attack rolls and grappling DC. It's only 1 face of the D20 that's affected by that change, having 18 instead of 20, so it's really, really not that big a deal. It's going to be completely fine to have a more rounded skill set at 18, 16, 14, 14, 10, 8, at the end. We'll put that on screen somewhere. And I also was having trouble finding a way to get strength to 20 and not also having dexterity and constitution on odd numbers by the end because of the feats that I was trying to take. It just worked out a lot better to leave strength at 18, bump constitution up to 14, and bump dexterity up to 16. It just worked out. Besides, with grapples, attack rolls, damage rolls, cunning strike DC, as well as the DC when we throw a net at someone, using a mixture of both strength and dexterity, I kind of wanted both of those to be decent anyway. And that was a lot easier to do if I left strength at 18 rather than 20. It's all trade-offs. Sometimes multiclassing be like that, sometimes single classing be like that. That's just kind of how the math works out sometimes. And as one last note before I get going, we can do a lot of what this build is for with any secondary class that gets extra attack. It doesn't have to be Artificer by any means. I went with Artificer mostly because of that Infiltrator armor giving us advantage on stealth checks, meaning that we didn't need to rely so much on reliable talent for our stealth checks. And speaking of those, I want to point out, as of level 17, with 16 in our dexterity score, a proficiency bonus of +6, doubled by expertise, we have a plus 15 to stealth, meaning, first of all, even without reliable talent, we always clear that DC 15 baseline anyway, but with reliable talent, we can't roll lower than a 25. 9 creatures out of the 503 in the monster manual, like I was mentioning earlier, can detect us with a 25, and 8 of those are ancient dragons. So as long as there isn't an ancient dragon around, or the one remaining creature, the DC 20 Animal Lord Celestial, we're golden. We can hide from anything else in the game. There may be some stuff in the expanded books. I didn't look through everything. There might be a couple more creatures that have really high passive perception. So even if we have disadvantage from not being an armor or artificer, we still are going to be completely fine basically all of the time. And with that, I believe that's all I have to say for today. I've been recording for more than an hour, which is unusual for build videos. In any case, thank you so much for watching all the way to the end, however long it ended up being. I appreciate you. If you didn't watch all the way to the end, you're not seeing this, and I still appreciate you. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and face tank your enemy's onslaught, then tie them up in chains or something, and I will see you in the next one. Please remember that D&D is for everybody, and have fun adventuring in 2025, almost 2026.